The French defense is probably one of the best openings to play as black against 1e4, and today I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you should start playing the French defense yourself. But before we begin, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any cool content. So please click the subscribe button down below, click the notification item, and you will receive notifications of every video as soon as I release them. So the reason number 1 why you should be playing the French defense yourself is to avoid tricks in the opening. So if you were playing as black against 1e4 and you are sick and tired of your opponent responding, for example, with some Scholar's Mate or some other kinds of tricks like fried liver attack, you don't have to worry about that if you play the French defense. And the starting moves are these ones. Your opponent's going to play e4, you play e6, and as soon as you play this move, d5, it's impossible for your opponent to play any other moves that are going to be tricks in the opening, like this one, for example, or even trying to go for some fried liver attack. It's not going to work against this opening. So you are 100% free of those opening tricks that your opponents might play against you. So reason number 1 is no Scholar's Mate, no fried liver attack. You are for sure free and once and for all free of those opening tricks. And the reason number 2 is that you are going to avoid theory, because all these lines with e5 are going to be extremely theory heavy, and when you play the French defense, you basically have to memorize 3 variations. After your opponent plays d4 and you play d5, your opponent can go for pretty much 3 things here. They can take your pawn, they can advance, or somehow try to defend this pawn, this central pawn right here, with a 9th move or something like this. So you pretty much have to know 3 variations. Exchange variation, advanced variation, and some other variation where your opponent might try to hold on to this pawn. So these are the typical lines that you should study. And they are fairly easy to go through. If you study them for a while, it's going to be really easy to play. So the French defense is very light in terms of theory, so you don't have to worry about memorizing as many variations, just like you do when you play e5, for example. Reason number 3 for playing the French defense is that you can equalize the game very early. And this is a good example when we play the exchange French defense. When your opponent take this pawn and you take back, you have an equal position on move 3. This is move 3 and you already reached an equal position as black. And we have to remind something here. I have to remind you guys that when we play black, we are aiming for equalization. We have to equalize the game. When you're playing white, you're playing for an advantage and for a win, but when you're playing black, you have to play to equalize the game and try to make white's life difficult, right? So the idea is to, white has to prove something, and you have to put some trouble, you have to put some obstacles in the way, and that's exactly what the French defense does. And for example, if you play the exchange French, it's very known as to be a very drawish position, but it's really hard for white to break through this position because it's extremely solid. And that brings us to the reason number 4 why you should play the French. And the reason is very well connected with reason number 3, which is reason number 4 is it's a very solid position. When you play the French defense, you are hardly ever going to suffer any problems. White's gonna have a lot of trouble breaking through your defenses. The French defense is one of the most solid defenses for black against 1e4. So if you want a very solid opening that is going to pose some difficulties to white, and it's gonna be very difficult to break through, the French defense is probably the one for you. And the reason number 5 for playing the French defense is that the French defense is extremely beginner friendly. So if you are just starting out in chess and you need a defense against 1e4, probably the French defense is going to be the easiest one to go for. So let me go through some main lines here. For example, if your opponent plays e4, you're going to respond with the French defense, e6. Opponent is going to go for d4 for the most part. You're going to play d5. From here, your opponent has 3 options, like we said. The French exchange variation, which is very easy to play. and the advanced variation, which is one of the most popular ones, and then protecting the pawn here with a knight move, right? And more often than not, these two lines are going to transpose to one another, so I'm going to teach you guys how to play against that. Let's imagine your opponent plays something like a knight to d2 or even a knight c3. If they play knight c3, try to hold on to the pawn, we are going to take this pawn, and after white recaptures, we're going to play knight to d7. We want to put this knight here, but if we move it here, before moving this knight, your opponent might try to take here and it would have to compromise your pawn structure. So that's why we move this knight here first, so we can go with this knight here, and in case white takes, we can capture back with our other knight. And white's probably going to develop the knight or the bishop. You're going to play knight gf6, and more often than not, opponent is going to take this, and you recapture with the knight. This is the Rubinstein French, one of the easiest variations to play against the French defense. If your opponent is playing as white, the knight moves here, here, and here, you can go for this variation. And if your opponent plays something different here, instead of taking the knight, they develop the bishop, for example, to d3, you can go ahead and take the knight yourself, and when they recapture, you move the other knight to f6, gaining a tempo over the bishop. So this is pretty much the same thing, and it transposes to the exact same position after knight takes, which is very similar. We're just going to win a tempo over the bishop. And from here, we have a very basic setup that we're going to follow. We're going to develop this bishop castle, play b6, fianchetto the bishop, and then play this very strong move here, c5. Okay, so that's what we're going to go for. Opponent is going to castle, we castle. They're going to play some moves. We're going to play b6, fianchetto, and then we play c5. If the opponent takes the pawn, d takes c5, we recapture with the bishop. If they play the queen over there, we're going to play queen to d5. We're aligning here a checkmate threat in the long diagonal. Probably white's gonna have to respond to that. Maybe they play knight to f3, and we have a great game of chess to go. We can centralize the rooks here if we want. We can kick this bishop out. There are many positions, many moves that we can go for here, but it's a very easy position to play, very solid. White's gonna have a lot of trouble trying to break through. If your opponent chooses to go for a different approach, when you play d5, they go for the exchange variation. This is a very easy one to play. You can just recapture here. I have some other sidelines that you can play against the exchange. I have some videos. I'm going to leave a card up here so you can check out some sidelines that you can play a little bit different from the basic exchange French, which is a very easy opening. You're going to develop your pieces. You're going to develop your pieces like kingside. You can castle, play this move. It's very easy to play. But it's very equalized and drawish, so white's gonna have a lot of trouble trying to break through and cause some damage. I would say that the most challenging one would be the advanced variation against this one. You can go for this move, and from here on there are some lines that you could study. I'm not going to show in this video because it's just too much, but I can make a separate video only about the advanced variation. Your opponent probably is going to go for this. There are some lines where you play this knight here and here, trying to exchange this bishop later on, these two bishops right here. Or you can just go ahead and play the typical French advanced line, which is very, very popular too. You just study some variations. That's why it's so beginner friendly. You don't have to study so many lines like in a Sicilian defense or e5 when you play as black. If you play the French, you just have to study 3 lines, which is the exchange, the advance, and some lines, for example, the Rubinstein, where your opponent is going to try to defend the pawn with the knight. So that's it. That's why I recommend the French for beginners. I think it's a very solid opening, very difficult for white to break through, and it's beginner friendly. You avoid all the tricky openings from white. And if you like this video again, guys, please remember to comment down below, leave your like, subscribe to the channel for more, and I see you guys as always in the next one.